Right, I've hit the button. We're live. Chris, you had a joke.
It was that thing about I'm tired of everyone telling me all about their phobias, you know? I mean, I've got vertigo, but you don't hear me shouting about it from the rooftops, do you?
And that's where we'll kick off. There we go. Boom, boom.
That was the joke.
And that is the highlight of today's pod.
And I've told it twice and you've not laughed both times.
That's because we're working. That's because we're working. Yeah.
Laughing on the inside.
My laughing brain's having a good time. Right. Welcome to the Good Brand Podcast. Good is a brand consultancy based in the United Kingdom. My name is Stuart Steele. I am the Strategy Director at Good Brand Consultants. And with me today is my erstwhile colleagues, Mr. Christopher Lumsden.
Hi.
And Ms. Julie Murdoch. And they do great jobs at Good.
Thanks. Good.
I'll get it right. I'll get it right.
Such good job. Such
good
job.
You do a good job. You do a good job. You know, you can do it. So today we're here to talk about. So we ran a survey. We ran a survey. Chris, you were the
survey master.
The survey master, a very good phrase. Master's a word I've got a lot in my head. So you're the survey master. Tell me why you decided. Why did you think we needed a survey? What was the survey?
The survey was about trying to find out where brand breaks down in B2B. Where are the friction points? You know, because all the theory's fine, and we talk about the theory a lot, but let's go out and talk to real clients and real people and say, where is the challenge? And I guess we talked about this on that pod with Terry, but it's just to dig into it a bit more and to ultimately help us and make us better at what we do. So there were, 10 or 12 questions. It wasn't rocket science. It was a bit quick and dirty, but it was designed to kind of dig into that question.
And we sent it out, so it was on the LinkedIn.
Yeah.
We sent it out through our mailing list. If you've not signed up to our mailing list, I'll leave a link in the comments in the description.
Show notes.
Thanks, Jules. So we'll leave it in the show notes. And then we got responses, and we got a reasonably good response. And there was some interesting, because you'd always got a bit of fear that this is just going to come back with meh. But it was actually quite interesting. There were some nice nuggets. Do you want to kick off with the highlights, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, it was. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I don't think we expect. I don't know, Stuart. I didn't think it was going to be meh. I thought it was always going to be quite interesting. And I think the key outtake was that it's not that there's no shortage or lack of people kind of applying or doing branding. It's what they do with it once they've done it that is the challenge. You know, one of the big ticks is that. And that's what we were talking about, Stuart, that everyone seems to what they consider to be a clear strategy with, you know, foundations for their brand. And, you know, there's people there, defined people that champion it, although that seems to be quite a disparate group. But the big challenge, I think, nets down to the fact that once it's all been done, it's not really being used to help shape business decisions.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, so it was good that everybody's kind of got their vision, mission, values, and is there, and then it kind of all falls apart. Is just, I think the phrase with the top answer for, you know, what's the biggest blocker for brand was brand is seen as superficial or non-essential,
and that's quite telling.
Yeah, but I find it. So my job is always about trying to find the tension between these two things, and it's interesting that brand is being seen as, you know, we've got to have a brand, and we're going to get somebody senior to support the brand. And then we're going to do it, and then we're just not. Then it's just kind of brushed off as something, you know, literally the phrase non-essential, which just seems weird.
Well, I think part of that is because it does sort of fall between the cracks, is in the sense that the ownership was, you know, there are senior people there, but it seems to be a bit unclear. From, you know, it ranges from the CEO owns the brand, you know, to sales or marketing. When it's that kind of spread, then you understand why accountability is so varied or missing.
Yeah. Does it then beg the question that businesses don't know what brand is for?
Maybe. Yeah, I certainly asked that question.
Well, let's take that up a bit. Is it, do businesses see brand in the same way as we see it, as a driver for growth or everything else? Or could it be the companies just see brand as here's a logo and here's some colours and here's a strapline?
Well, Jules, what do you think? Because I think that's the key question.
Well, yeah, and I think, well, it is that, and it kind of ties to your point of where does the ownership lie? Is it the colouring, and is marketing seen as the colouring in department that makes sure the logo's the right colours when it's slapped on the wall and the vision, mission, values are, put up on nice big posters in the back of the toilet doors, and that's the only time they're ever actually referenced. Or when you're talking about, do we have a clearly defined strategy? Is that a strategy that is informing and making on day to day, not just at strategic level, but they operate. We talk a lot about that, about values informing behaviours. What do we expect? Is it used in recruitment profiles and job profiles and onboarding of employees, as well as the customer facing stuff? And unless it lives across all of those things, then it is going to fall between the cracks, and it is going to become. And we all, I know this is a slightly separate point, but going through a process at the moment where a brand transition job with a client where they've done a lot of this stuff before, and I think and it hasn't necessarily been, the outputs haven't been particularly actionable or maybe meaningful, or maybe both. And I think it's, how do you translate the strategy into something that means something across the whole business? And that's a lot of what we talk about in terms of the stakeholder consultation.
I think that's a great point, because it goes back to much of the stuff in this space can become very abstracted and very difficult and very unclear as to how it's actually used on a day-to-day basis. And that's one of the challenges that we do come up against. So I think that's absolutely right, Jules. That's, and to go back to Stuart's original question, I think, of course, they don't see it the way we see it. And I think there is a bit, if I was being generous, I would be saying that it's maybe just lost in a bit of the fog of war. But if I was being unkind, I'd say it's that thing that they go through the motions of some of this stuff and then it lives in a drawer because it's what you do, And I think there is a big gap between understanding how to action stuff once you've done it.
And I think, but you make the point, and I think it's called out within the kind of the article, that unless all of this comes from the top down and through the business, then even with a clearly defined strategy, the opportunity to then make, what's my point? And the opportunity to then make that meaningful is somewhat limited, because it has to come from, it has to live and be part of boardroom conversations, and it has to come from senior leadership all the way down. It can't exist just in a silo within the marketing function. Otherwise, it does just, like you say, fall through the cracks. And
I think the point that Julie made, which was quite interesting, around the boardroom, and it's for it to have an effect and to have a real, is the way that we see brand being an effective
that was what
tool.
I was kind of, what I was. I knew I lost my train of thought, but that was the question.
For brand to be an effective tool at the boardroom, if it's just going to be about, if it's perceived as just a story about colours and a thing, the kind of thing is what's missing to get it, what's the step that's missing to get it into the boardroom. And I think, as you say, Chris, and most businesses, they don't have a brand gap, they've got a belief gap. I mean, you've called it a strategy gap, but to be specific on what that strategy is, it's a brand. They don't have a brand strategy gap. They'll have a brand. Well, in fact, I would say that they don't have a brand strategy. I think they've got a brand.
They've probably got a brand and they've got a business strategy with no clear correlation or connection between the two, which ties back to that original point about measurement, or the whole point about measurement, about not understanding where the levers and the areas that brand can influence. And
this all ladders up to the point that there's no fixed way of doing this. One person's strategy is another person's tactical execution plan. The two things are muddied. So that comes across in the survey.
But I think I always go back to Jeremy Peterson talking about it when we used to do, clients that go through their QBR. Jeremy would always talk about he needs to be able to show his green arrows and think about, and that was always presenting the brand as an investment in a way that it wasn't necessarily. I mean, we're not talking like the kind of the big broad perception analysis brand tracking metrics, but just being able to break that down into smaller incremental chunks of showing some impact. But that's hard.
Well, I think what you're talking about, to be fair, is what we're about to move on to. That's quite a nice link to pick up the Jeremy piece and talk about that, a client that used to talk about that, because I think we talk around the result, the survey, but the bit we're moving on to is, so how do we fix that? As you say,
I think it's worth stressing belief. So I think the interesting thing with brand is, depending on the point of view that you've got with it, you've got brand from the perspective of the big brand film at the sales conference. And we've got a big brand film, and you see it and everybody feels good, and it feels like you're going to win an Oscar, and everybody feels great.
A rallying call to get behind it. This is where we're going. And
so then the brand has done a job, and everybody feels good about that. And then I think there is that step about being brand, as you said, Julie, brand strategy being business strategy. It's like, how does the brand help you achieve your business goals? And that's where the belief starts to the lack of belief starts to creep in. So brand does a good job of making people feel that it is an important part of the business to differentiate you out there, but it doesn't do anything, or it's hard to see how it does more from that. And I think because it just goes out and everybody, did you like the video? Yeah, I liked the video. Then thumbs up for the brand. The next step is
how it's seen. That's how it's seen. And some people define that's brand's job. But and your point's a good one. It's like, in that sense, it's tick the box. Yeah. But we wanted to work hard on that.
And that's when, so then you've kind of got there, and then you kind of go, well, the brand can help you grow your business. And that's when the lack of belief creeps in, because the question is how.
Yeah.
And you go, and then the answer is, you're going to have to wait 3 years. You go, what?
Yeah. I was going to say, just that takes us on to the next thing about what the fix is. Is this the right time to do that?
Well, Julie,
I was going to just say because we've also seen clients that have done that well, where they've used the sort of overarching brand vision, mission, values as the kind of big rallying call to kick off a, annual sales conference or whatever it may be. And then linked that to acquisitions the business has made that year, technology acquisitions that are going to take them into a different territory that will help set them apart from competitors, that will grow their product offering, how they're and then successes over the year that are partly customer successes, partly sales success, whatever that story is. And it does all come from it, and it did all come from the kind of the core brand bit. So even though you're talking, and I'm thinking about a specific example, but and it was just because you were talking about film, it was a film that they played at the start to kick it off. There was sales, it was their global sales team, it was distributors, their big event of the year. But it was a clear brand message supported by a community, supported by a series of messages and success metrics, I guess, that showed how it had, I guess, supported or impacted the business that year. And that's not, so it wasn't just metrics or measurement in we did this, from a kind of traditional ROI figure, but there's also, there are other ways that you can I guess, what am I trying to say, make it feel more meaningful for the people that work in the business rather than the people that are leading the business.
So, Chris, you and I, when we were going over these results, it was kind of interesting, and the kind of point at the end of it was, well, so what? And while we came up with a summary that there's a belief challenge, the question was then raised about, well, how do we, it's our responsibility as a brand consultancy to kind of go, how do we help overcome this? Because I would say there's some responsibility, well, there's quite a lot of responsibility with businesses like ours, consultancies like ours, to kind of help clients do that. And we came up with, how do we do that?
Well, it's about how do we build belief at the top table, and that's by demonstrating effectiveness and measurement, right? Which are hard, because proving, as Jules has just said, there's different ways of measuring that stuff, but proving brand's value in hard metrics isn't. Firstly, we have to be comfortable with the fact to say that it's not always possible, but where it is possible, it does make all the difference. And you're right, it's up to us to push clients to do that and to encapsulate that into their thinking and capture it, because that's what will justify the seat at the table, and that's what's going to give it the voice. There are, there are ways of doing that, but I think that's the key point, the so what. And measurement's the key for that. I'm kind of saying the same thing again.
So when you say measurement...
How do we do that is the next question.
Because again, the challenge with that is, traditionally, if you read the books, the measurement's going to be, just hold on 3 years and we'll get something for you. That's the...
Maybe.
Maybe. If you do this and spend all of that money, then maybe that'll happen. And that's true. These are the challenges of working in brand. It's not, it's not an exact science. But I think... And I have to say, you guys are very good at that with clients. I've seen you do it recently with a new client, which is about, start by being very intentional at the beginning of the whole engagement and defining what the parameters are. What are the expectations up front? And don't let the project move without defining them. And I think we've let clients off the hook with that in the past, and that's on us, not them. We've got to find the impact that can be measured, however big or small, but only if everyone kind of agrees with what that looks like. And I do look back at a number of, I guess, ones that got away, in the past, because we've just not done it. And maybe that was a combined lack of experience with application. And it's used to, you've driven this. There are two types of indicators I think we can outline. Some are easier than others. And I think the quick ones are what you call leading indicators. And they are pretty soft signals pretty soft metrics, but they can help capture early movement and and build confidence for the marketing or brand team. While the bigger values grow. So there are things like easy things like share a search, NPS scores, what's the sales team's confidence level at, email engagement, surveys, things like that, stuff that you can do quite quickly and quite dirty, like we've just done with this survey, right? That build confidence internally. They don't scream ROI, but they're useful.
I would also take that even into campaign effectiveness. If you think about, we don't do it all the time, but if you think about running you don't need to, it doesn't all need to be kind of brand tracking that you run annually. You can do a piece if you're running a campaign, test the messaging resonance. Are you clear in what you're saying? Do people know you? Do they know what they know you for? And is your message clear, or is it internally the whole inside out bias? But yeah, so there's a whole range of things, like you say, that are relatively quick and easy wins or losses. But course correction can then be applied.
They generate momentum. It's also really important just to get some baseline reads on where we are, because a lot of this stuff is supposition around a boardroom table. So it's quite important to calibrate where we are. And then I do think that, the longer ones are the lagging indicators, and they're the harder value-based metrics, the ones that really count in the boardroom. All the usual suspects of, sales increases, margins, uplifts, customer lifetime value, share increase, all that kind of stuff. And they are big, gnarly numbers that take time. And it's not just brand that moves that needle, but it contributes to it. So it might be, you want to decide a contribution metric of how much brand is going to be part of that metric or that measurement. But they are the long-term reward for doing things consistently, quarter over quarter, year over year, right?
Yeah, I think if I had to pick, because I would have some question about the campaign effectiveness, because I think that's isolated within, because it's trying to tie that back to brand to kind of go, well, was it the campaign creative? Was it the messages of the product? What is it? If it's trying to tie it back to brand, the thing that you can always do is with your sales team is go, are you happier selling? Is your story easier? Do people get it quicker? And again, always going back to the sales team to kind of go, is because that's always where it hits first. It's the most proactive going out. But so one of the things that we're doing with the company just now is like, what is the one story that we can tell your clients that is understood? And that's where the sales cycles go a little bit quicker. Are you are you doing one call instead of two? What is it you're doing? So there's lots of I think you've got, it is the sales team, is if you had one thing to focus on is conversations with them every month, go, how's it been?
Yeah.
But I think, and not counter the point, but around, when I'm talking campaign effectiveness, I'm thinking specifically of campaigns that are built around brand level messaging, so not necessarily product launch. So to complement what you're talking about with how sales conversations are going, if there's an awareness, if you're talking top level brand awareness, I want to be known for X, then you you invest in a campaign to put out there. Is that actually what is your value prop clear?
It's an interesting point, because weirdly, I hadn't considered a campaign. When you said campaign, I hadn't considered brand campaign, because they're very rarely done. So it's an interesting thing that I automatically jumped there to where I was going, because brand campaigns about going, hi, we are this, we believe in this is why you should be interested as in building up that mental availability. They are quite rare. It's always,
well, they're very few and far between, particularly in the B2B space. And how many times have we had that conversation about product launches where you're trying to do a product and a brand job in one, because there isn't that consistent messaging around just fundamentally what the brand is there to do, or that.
So what's interesting about that is almost like, so you get your brand but you don't give it a chance. It's almost, so while you do your internal video and everybody, that rallying cry, is almost like you're not giving, the brand has then suddenly got to support a product, which it should do, but it doesn't give itself a chance to breathe, because you're not explaining, you're not introducing yourself in the right way. You're turning into there. So it's interesting. This is a nice little dig. That's why I like doing these wee pods. You're kind of doing a little bit of a dig in. So I wasn't considering a brand, because we just don't do them. And actually, that's possibly where it becomes superficial or non-essential, because you're not giving it the chance to. But it's difficult, because without a measurement, we've got to do it.
Well, that's the point.
Well, this is the point. Sorry. Carry on. Sorry, I was just going to say that, and That is the point, because we've had, and there are practical organizational issues that exist within our clients' businesses that we can't influence, and often they can't influence. We had a conversation with a client a number of years ago about who at CMO level was committed to investing in a brand campaign because of the way that the marketing budgets were structured and marketing teams' incentives were all based on leads and ops. There was never any incentive or motivation for them to take a portion of their regional budget and put it into a brand campaign. So it tethers all the way back up to that point of, where does brand live and does it have a place at the boardroom table? Because if it doesn't, if there's not a budget for brand campaign investment at whatever level and whatever that looks like, if you're reliant on it at an executional level within marketing teams, it's always going to go to where the incentives lives, which generally is, I know that's a separate pod and it's a separate conversation, but all ties to that point about investment in brand consistently ongoing and then ultimately long-term impact.
Do you know who I blame for that? Do you know who I blame? I blame
Steve
Apple.
Jobs.
Yeah, pretty much. Because the challenge is, when you see a big brand campaign, it looks expensive and big deal and everything else, when actually it doesn't need to be. It's not that. You can do very good brand campaigns at a very good budget that will have an impact. It doesn't need to be 1984 somebody throwing a hammer getting Ridley Scott to do it. It doesn't.
Do you think what Julie's point though is, it's almost as if the marketing or whether the marketing or they see that spend at that level without there being it to generate any sort of return as just wasteful.
I think there is a bit of that, but I think at the first time when you see brand campaign, again, mental availability, you think, yeah, super duper, and went, well, we can't afford that. And that's what you're up against. And I think that's why
we're launching this product next month, and that's where all the budget needs to go.
And it doesn't need to be at an equal basis, but I think you have to. It's a bit like, right, seeing the old days, right? Right, see, in the old days, when I was out chatting.
Sure,
up
in
the
old
chicks,
days you were in theatre. You were in theatre in the old days.
I was chatting up the chicks. You know what I wasn't doing when I was
up the what, Stuart?
Chatting up the chicks. When I was out chatting up the chicks, you know what? I wasn't going up to a woman in a bar and going, "Hey, would you like to see my house?" I wasn't selling the product. I was going, "Hi, my name is Stuart. You're not going to like me, and if you had lower standards, we would be getting on really, really good here." You introduce yourself before you kind of try and sell the product.
Yeah.
And
yeah, we've talked about that before. Yes.
Yeah, and that's just this brand. And so I understand why the belief is lost, because this conversation has helped me focus this. It doesn't, in some cases, brand isn't given a chance because it seemed to be an expense. But we've spent 40 grand, 100 grand defining the brand.
To some extent, this conversation is part of the process. It is being intentional about what it is we're looking to do, and not just letting it run away with itself and run away straight to product marketing or whatever it's going to be. It's understanding that. And I think the more time that's taken to follow those conversations to wherever they lead, Jules, and your point is that it sometimes can lead into a political minefield. Fine, let's park that and find something else. It's about just taking the time to do that and be honest about the fact that brand takes time out. You won't see results overnight, and there will be projects that come and go where there are no KPIs attached to them, and we just have to be fine with that.
Well, but I don't think that's true. I think it's a KPI. There's always got to be a measurement of success. I think
Stuart, I just mean.
Not necessarily on a purist brand
right.
level.
Yeah, you can argue it till you're blue in the face. I just mean sometimes through timings or whatever it is, there are needs to execute immediately for whatever. But equally, I can flip-flop on that. That ideally, in an ideal world, you should be able to lay down metrics to measure everything, right?
I think this comes to how we reflected on this ourselves. I think there's always something. I think there's always soft, and I think there's hard. And even soft metric shows that there's something that's happening. Yeah. You're moving some needle somewhere. Yeah. But I think what was interesting once we looked at when we looked at what we were doing, is that we had to reflect on ourselves. Go, well, are we doing a good job of building?
No,
this
you're right,
belief?
And it brought us two threads together, because I mean, one of the things that we've been doing over the years is capturing the stuff that we have measured and putting it in a PowerPoint deck, and it lives on my desktop or on the server, or all the data that we've gathered from design effectiveness awards that we've won, and you put it all together and you take a step back from it and you think, wow, that's quite an impressive body of work. The reality is, though, it's taken 2 decades to get to that point. 2 decades. And the number of projects that are actually in a measurable kind of format are somewhere between 40 and 50. But across those projects, we've managed to track whether it's revenue, savings, efficiencies, behaviors, or even ultimate valuations of businesses, we've managed to do that. And so, yeah, what that turned around, we had the conversation, it's turned, and we've updated our website because of it, because we've put that stuff on the website.
I think, though, what's interesting about, as you say, the thing that's on the website when you look at it is the fact that there's a range of metrics. And I think that's the thing. So to go back to that, whatever a traditional ROI is or whatever, X, Y, I think what's interesting when you go down the page and you look at it, you go, so you're measuring that and that and that or that with that. It's very dependent on the project and then the output of it. And I think that was, again, just seeing it all in one place. And I make no excuse for the long scroll because I think it's quite impressive when you just see all the things. It's not just that there's a lot of pluses, a lot of green arrows, but the fact that it's across such a diverse amount of metrics, I thought was quite interesting.
Well, I think it's taken us that amount of time to get to the point where we feel capable and comfortable to ask the questions and become comfortable with the fact that some of them don't have answers, right?
Yeah.
And it does make me kick myself or think about the ones that got away, because, there have been projects we've done where we've not been disciplined enough to ask those questions and force the client as much as possible to look into that mirror. But we're there now, and I think I'm very proud of it. Very proud of it.
Go and have a look. Good. This has been a good wee chat. I've learned things. I never learned things until I talked to you guys. So that's us.
That's what we're saying.
That's good. No,
belief,
I think it was worthwhile doing. It was
Yeah.
an interesting survey, and I think it just I think it was nice that the survey helped us reflect on how we can help clients better, because that was the whole point. So, as you say,
and a lot of it is us keeping ourselves accountable, isn't it? To ask the question, to probe, to be useful in terms of even just guiding some of those, guiding the client around some of those softer metrics.
Yeah, there are always metrics we can use. Yeah, good.
Brilliant.
All right,
YTB.
Right. See you guys later.
See you later.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.